You have a morning routine. Most people do. Alarm off, bathroom light on. And before you have said a word to anyone, 12 products are already on your body. Shampoo, conditioner, moisturiser, deodorant, foundation, lipstick. It feels like self-care. Every label says it is. Women have been doing versions of this for centuries. The cold cream on the dressing table, the powder compact in the handbag, the lipstick that came out for every occasion that mattered. Passed through generations with the quiet assurance that if it had always been used, it was probably fine. Nobody questioned the jar of Pond's cold cream on the bathroom shelf. It smelled like safety. It felt like tradition. But here's what nobody put on the label. The average American woman uses 12 products daily. Each contains a dozen or more chemicals. Less than 20% have been assessed for safety. Not by an independent agency, not by anyone with authority to act. That isn't a gap in the system. That's the system working as designed. This isn't a story about one bad ingredient. It's the story of how an industry spent decades applying questionable chemistry to your skin, with almost no one required to stop. This didn't start in the 1950s. It started much earlier than that, and the women who lived through it had no idea. Go back to ancient Egypt and the women lining their eyes with coal every morning. Coal was a mixture containing lead sulfide, not a trace contaminant. It was a deliberate daily application, considered essential to looking presentable. Go back to Elizabethan England. Pale skin was not just fashionable, it was a signal of class and status. The product that delivered it was Venetian ceruse. White lead mixed with vinegar was smoothed across the face and neck each morning. Queen Elizabeth I wore it so heavily and so consistently that historians believe it contributed to her declining health. The women following her example were doing exactly the same thing, one careful application at a time, completely unaware. By the Victorian era, arsenic was in the face powder. Literally. Arsenic complexion wafers were sold in pharmacies, marketed to women who wanted that fashionable pale, luminous look. The packaging was elegant. The instructions were calm. The product was slowly poisoning the women who used it faithfully. Mercury appeared in skin-lightening creams and stayed there for decades, promoted as a reliable treatment for freckles and age spots and uneven skin, the kinds of concerns women were repeatedly told required a solution. Consider Johnson & Johnson's baby powder. It was in American bathrooms for generations, the product that seemed to smell like innocence itself. Mothers dusted it onto their babies, and women used it on themselves every single morning for decades. It sat on bathroom shelves as a symbol of gentleness and trust, so deep it never occurred to anyone to question it. Then came thousands of lawsuits alleging the talc contained asbestos, and that it had contributed to ovarian cancer in women who had used it faithfully their entire adult lives. The company discontinued the talc-based formula in North America in 2020. That is not ancient history. That is well within living memory. Then the 1950s arrived, with its factories and synthetics, and genuine belief that chemistry was solving everything. It did not introduce danger into the beauty routine. It inherited centuries of it, scaled it up, put it on television, and called it progress. The mindset changed, but the fundamental problem did not. Here is what is actually inside the bottle. Not the marketing language on the front, but the ingredients list on the back, printed small enough that most people never read it. Ingredients: carcinogens, neurotoxins, reproductive toxins. Not theoretical risks conjured by alarmists, but substances with documented links to cancer, developmental damage, and disrupted hormones in controlled studies. Lead in lipstick, chemicals linked to cancer in baby shampoo, flame retardants in human blood. These are not trace contaminants that snuck in by accident. They were formulated into products. The industry's answer has always been the same. The doses are small. too small to cause harm. But consider the math the industry never runs. A woman using lipstick daily from age 20 to 70 applies it roughly 18,000 times. 18,000 small doses absorbed through the thinnest skin on the body, a little more under the arms, a little on the hair, stacked every morning for 50 years. The dose argument stops being reassuring at that scale. And it collapses for anyone whose job puts them inside these chemicals all day. Synthetic hair dyes, wildly popular by the 1950s and 1960s, contained compounds later linked to bladder cancer in hairdressers with prolonged exposure. The women dyeing their hair every 6 weeks at home and the stylists applying it for 40 years were part of the same UN-monitored experiment. Different doses, same ingredients, nobody tracking the outcome. Here is the part that stops people entirely. Scientists can now measure toxic load in newborns, before the first bath, before the first product. The exposure begins before the routine does, because it was already inside the people who became their parents. The FDA's record is stark. Since 1938, it has banned just 8 ingredients out of more than 12,000 used in cosmetics. 8. The watchdog was never given anything real to work with. So if the FDA is not checking, who is? The answer is the industry itself. In 1938, Congress passed the Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act and handed the FDA authority over cosmetics. Not because regulators were being proactive, because more than 100 people had died from a pharmaceutical disaster, a sulfur drug mixed with a toxic solvent. The cosmetics provisions were added as an afterthought. The agency was given authority and almost no tools to use it. The industry noticed. 5 years before that law passed, the FDA had assembled a public exhibit of dangerous products. Investigators called it the Chamber of Horrors. It included a lash dye called Lash Lure that had blinded several women. The exhibit toured to build public support for stronger regulation. Congress ignored it until people died. The pattern was set early. Evidence of harm, then delay, then minimal action, then the industry filling the gap. That gap is still being filled the same way. Cosmetics manufacturers set up their own safety panel to review ingredients and issue recommendations. Compliance is voluntary. The industry writes its own rules and decides whether to follow them. Words like natural, herbal and organic carry no legal definition on cosmetics labels. Any product can use those words regardless of what is inside. Then there is this. Estée Lauder runs one of the most visible breast cancer awareness campaigns in the cosmetics industry. Pink packaging, public commitments, and in the same factories formulating products with chemicals linked to cancer. That is not hypocrisy hidden somewhere. That is hypocrisy at eye level on the shelf. The European Union has restricted or banned over 1,000 chemicals in cosmetics. American companies reformulated when required and found a way. The chemistry was never the obstacle. Accountability was. In America, that accountability never came. Here's what the store never tells you. The choices that feel meaningful at the shelf, 49 shades of lipstick, shampoo for every hair type imaginable, moisturiser for every skin concern ever named, are not the choices that matter. The real decisions happened at the factory, before the product was bottled, before it was placed at eye level with a reassuring word on the front. By the time it reaches your hand, the important choice has already been made without you. You've been inside this system your entire life without knowing it. The jar of Pond's cold cream on your mother's dressing table. The Aquanet hairspray in the bathroom cabinet. Sprayed in an enclosed space every single morning for decades. Its aerosol chemistry never meaningfully questioned by anyone with authority to act. The CoverGirl foundation that came out for every important occasion. The Revlon lipstick that sat on every respectable dressing table in America. Trusted completely. Never fully scrutinised. The trust wasn't naive. It was inherited. passed down through generations alongside the products themselves, as quietly and naturally as a family recipe. Think about the woman who used the same cold cream her mother used and her grandmother used before that, never questioning it because the trust came with the jar. That's not carelessness. That's a system that relied on inherited trust instead of demonstrated safety. The tools exist now that did not exist then. Online databases score products ingredient by ingredient. Green chemists design substances that are non-toxic from the very start. Responsible companies already reformulate without being forced. But the gap between a better solution existing and every woman standing in that aisle, being able to find and afford that solution, remains wide. And most people reaching for the familiar bottle have no idea the gap is there at all. The label still says natural. The scent still smells like safety. Nothing on the outside has changed. You thought you were just doing your morning routine, standing at a mirror, taking care of yourself, making choices that felt personal and deliberate. What you were actually doing was trusting a system that was never fully designed to protect you, and that has never been legally required to try. The women using Venetian ceruse did not know. The women applying mercury cream did not know. And for most of the last century, neither did you. The packaging changed, the century changed, the fundamental problem did not. The fix is not complicated. Require safety testing before products reach shelves. Give the FDA real authority. Define natural so the word means something. Companies have already proven they can reformulate when other governments demand it. The chemistry is not the obstacle. The accountability is. That lipstick you've worn for years, the shampoo that smells like every ordinary morning you've ever had, they might be perfectly safe. But nobody in charge was ever required to find out. If you grew up using any of these products, the cold cream, the talc, the hair dye, the lipstick you wore without a second thought, tell us your story in the comments below.